Continuing on with this wiring project, we started here at the beginning. This is the starter motor, of course. Got a power lug here on the end, and that seems to be the main connection point for everything. So you have a battery cable here, in this case runs to the negative side of the battery because this car is positive ground. So we put that in, got the cable run down through the battery box and down underneath and out through the grommet and down here and onto the starter. And then we got this red wire that ostensibly runs from the battery or the power source. I suppose you could hook the wire to the battery, back up into the car under the dash, and goes to the ammeter. And it goes to the ammeter because everything feeds through the ammeter. And yeah, that's good and bad. You can get a failure of the ammeter. That's not good, especially when it's behind the dash. So most modern cars today will use a voltmeter rather than an ammeter, because a voltmeter is just telling you how many volts are in the battery or how many volts the charging system is putting out versus how many amps. And it's a lot safer to wire in a voltmeter than it is an ammeter. But we're going to go the way it was, and that's where we started. We also wired our fuel pump on the other side, and we can go around and have a look at that. So we've got our two wires to our fuel pump. One goes to ground and the other goes to the power side of the coil. Those are yellow wires, and we'll probably put some shrink tubing over them when it's all done. And then what we've done here is we have our fuse block, and we've run a wire from the fuse block over to the coil, and there'll be another wire coming from the ignition switch to the fuse block that will join in there, so that when you turn the ignition switch on, you get power to the coil and the fuel pump. And these fuse blocks, at least in the diagram, is labeled A1, A2, A3, and A4. Our block is labeled A2, A3, and A4, and for some reason the A1 terminal looks like it says B, so who knows. But from there, what we've done so far is coming off here on this side of the fuse is power. This goes down to the brake light switch. I forgot where this wire goes already, but it goes up under the dash and hooks, I think, to the fog lights or something like that, and then ties in a bunch of other stuff in the system. I'll have to dig the diagram out. I've eaten lunch since I hooked that up yesterday. There's a terminal here, and what we believe is this terminal runs up to the electric wiper motors. And then down here we've run this pink wire out, purple, pink, whatever you want to call it, and that's going to run up to the front badge bar for the horn. So that's really what we've got done so far. We're just kind of stringing wires out to see where they go and where they need to go and what kind of a harness we're going to come up with, and then we'll wrap them in spiral wrap or shrink wrap them or whatever. We also have our voltage regulator up here, and we've got our cheat sheet here with the terminals marked looks like D, E, A, and F, and we're going to have to hook that up so that our generator doesn't overcharge, because the generator will put out a whole pile of DC voltage, and if you don't regulate it to a certain level, you can have problems. So that's where we are so far. I've got to get back and study the diagram a little bit more. One thing that's particularly annoying is there's a lot of diagrams and helpful information that I found, but nobody tells you what size wire to use. They're happy to tell you what color the wire should be, but nobody tells you what size wire to use. And you can put too large of a wire in a circuit, but you can't get away with putting too small of a wire in a circuit. For that particular reason, down here on this main feed to the ammeter, we've gone to a 10 gauge wire. I think that ought to be enough to feed this system. There's really not anything high demand in this car. These modern style headlights are probably the highest demand item, and we'll probably wire them through a relay to help support that. But really, you have the fuel pump. I think that's a solid state pump. Probably doesn't draw a lot of amperage, and the ignition doesn't draw much. And then you've got your lights, and really that's it. This thing doesn't even have a heater blower, the windshield wipers. There's no electric fan, so there's really not a lot going on here. And we'll just keep stringing wires until we figure out whether we got it right or not. We had our voltage regulator bolted to the car just so we know where it was, and we've taken it back off. This is not a regulator that I normally see. I suppose it works. It's a Lucas RB108 regulator. It's what we got with the car, 12 volt. It's got some grommets there in the feet to mount it to the car, so I guess it doesn't have to be grounded. I suppose it's supposed to be insulated, as a matter of fact. I got 4 terminals on the bottom, D, E, A, and F, and we can find those on the wiring schematic. So we're just going to have to try to figure out how to make this work. There's some other numbers on there, but sort of meaningless for us. We'll see. The other thing that is kind of, I'll have to show you. So this lump of stuff is the wiring that we got with the car. And yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't think that's going to work out. I have no idea what that is. The only thing that I noticed on here is these extra large spade terminals. There's 2 of them, and I would guess that they poke onto the extra large spade terminals on the voltage regulator. So maybe this part of the harness here is what went to the voltage regulator. All these wires are the same color, old crappy wires, and you can see it even here. There's some kind of dinky solder job, not very good, so we're going to have to start from scratch. You know it's time to take a break when you record a whole segment and realize that you haven't turned the camera on. It's definitely time for a break. So we started to wire up our voltage regulator, and we've got the F terminal wired there and the E terminal. I've got to get some 3/8 spade terminals, don't have any of those. The E terminal here appears to be ground, so we've got a little short lead here to ground to the car, and then 2 longer leads, one for the horn and one for the wiper motor. This F terminal goes to the F terminal of the generator, and we've made that red with the yellow tracer. And of course the A terminal goes up to the amp meter, and the D terminal goes to the D terminal of the generator and gets a second wire tattooed in with it that goes to that little red light that comes on, that the charge indicator light. So we kind of got that going, and we've strung some other wires in various places, and we'll just kind of sneak up on it here until we get circuits laid out so that we know that we have what we need to get everything working. I'm going to, the schematic shows that the fuel pump is grounded to that F terminal, and quite frankly, I'm just going to ground it over there to the other side of the cowl or foot box, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's going to be the same. Just one less wire I got to put into that push-on terminal, so that'll make things a little easier. But yeah, time for a break. Well, I think I have the regulator figured out. Let's hope. Let's hope. This one is the D terminal, and we have a red and white wire that goes over to the generator, and then this pink wire is going to go up to the dash to the ignition warning lamp. And I think how that works is that when the generator is not generating, or there's no amperage or voltage, it goes to ground and turns the light on. That's how I think that works. And then we have this next one here that's really just a ground. So I think what we're going to do is ground that here somewhere, that one, and then the other two wires, one is a ground for the horn and one is a ground for the wipers. And then we have this red wire, which is the A terminal, so that one before is the E. The A terminal just goes up to the ammeter. And then we have this one over here, the F terminal, which is red with the yellow, and that goes to the F side of the generator. And let's hope it all works. And then in behind this, of course, we have this little fuse block with two fuses in it that work some of those other circuits. So really what I'm trying to do now is just run wires, and they're all too long and they're all going all over the place, but at some point we'll figure out the best way to route all of them. Some of them will go through this little grommet here. The majority of them, there's a grommet right in the center of the foot box, and I think the majority of the wires, let's say the ones that go up to the dash and all these, will be in a bundle at some point. We'll wrap them with some wrap and run them up under there, and then they'll go where they need to go up under the dash. We're going to still need to run wires from our headlights back through there, and of course our horn wire is this one. It'll probably run separately down inside the frame rail. We'll have to kind of figure that out, but slow progress. I did get a couple of these 3/8 spade terminals, and we had to put a little bit of shrink tubing over them because they didn't have these watertight connections on those two, but that's okay, it'll work out all right. You know, wiring is not my thing, but we'll see if we can make it work. This one here, as I said before, normally there's another wire in this group of grounds that grounds the fuel pump, and rather than glom them all here, we'll just ground the fuel pump over there, and it's all going to be grounded through this metal work anyway. So you know, one thing about these cars is you can't have enough ground wires, that's for sure. Grounding the engine to the frame, and the body to the frame, and the battery to the frame, and you never have enough ground wires. So we'll see how it all works out. It's a new day out here in, well, backyard. Actually in the shop, but shop's in the backyard, so technically that's where we are. But still playing with this wiring. This is not going to be a 5-minute job. But we've got a lot of the wires run, lengths of wire, and my initial inspiration, whatever you want to call it, was to run these primary wires down here through that grommet in the firewall and then off to where they go. But I have had a chance to look at some photos, and I got to admit I probably have 1,000 MGTC photos on the computer that I've downloaded. Every time I see one for sale or see a story on one, I try to go in and grab the photos, and it's like going to the library. If you're not sure about how something is routed or where it should go or how it should fit, sometimes it's a good idea just to go and study photos. At any rate, a lot of the photos, most of them actually, that I have looked at, run most of the wires through this grommet right here. And that obviously the regulator and the fuse box on those cars is different. This regulator has the same connections. It has a separate fuse box. A lot of the ones that I looked at had a black regulator here with a fuse panel, connection panel underneath it. So all the wires go onto screw terminals and then they just go down and go through this grommet. I am going to try to see if I can feed all of these wires from here into this grommet through a loom. And then, of course, some of them go to the dash anyway, and other ones go elsewhere, and perhaps the proper way is to run them in through here, and that cleans up all of this area here, and then the ones that need to come back out can go under the dash and come back out of that grommet back down there to where they need to go. The two being these two, for instance, that go to the generator. I was just going to run them down across. Well, it might be tidier just to go ahead and run them here and then under the dash and then back out. And the same for these two. One is for the brake light switch and one is for the horn. And I was going to run them in a loom down across here, but it might be better to run them in the hole here and actually bring them out through the same hole over here where the battery cable and the other alternator cable go. Now, I don't know if there's enough room over there for that or not, but conceivably, since this brake light wire has to go down to the chassis here, we could run it down along the corner of the foot plate and out the bottom, and the same with the horn and then up the frame rail. And that might clean up a lot of that wiring. So yeah, that's what we're going to try to do next here. We'll do that off camera and see if we can clean that up, see what we end up with. Okay, then we took a little time and pulled all the wires back out of wherever they were going and put them all down through this grommet here. And I have to say that it certainly looks a little tidier, cleans up this whole firewall area here, cowl section, whatever you want to call it. I'm not particularly excited about the location of this fuse box. That's where it was before because their two holes were there. But since we're being creative, I might take this fuse box and move it over here. I hate drilling more holes in there, but sometimes we could have thought things out a little better before we started, but that's okay. We'll put a couple of bolts in those holes or something, and nobody will know that there's nothing there but bolts. At any rate, I mean, it's okay where it is. It's just if you have to check a fuse or work on it, it's in behind all these wires, and it'd be much easier if it were mounted up here out of the way. So we'll work on that. And I was going to put all of these wires in a loom of some type. I really don't know, as short as this distance is, if that's entirely possible. I mean, I could wrap them with something, but to be very honest, it's going to really make them difficult to work with. So I might just let this go. Certainly is colorful. A lot to be said for making every wire the same color and just numbering them, but that's a different story for a different day. But underneath the dash where they come in, I can certainly separate the brown ones into a loom, and the green ones into a loom, and the red ones into a loom, and then split them off. Some go to the dash, some will come back out through the firewall there, go to the generator and various places up to the horn. So we've got at least all of the wires. One wire here that I haven't connected yet, and I think it comes from the ignition switch to the fuse blocks here. I'm going to have to double check that, but either comes from the amp meter or the ignition switch to the fuse box, and that'll go in this hole with the rest of them. I haven't put that one in yet, but I think for all intents and purposes we have all of this wiring hooked up at this end. Let's put it that way. I'm going to leave, this is a lead to the coil and then over to the fuel pump, and I'm going to leave that there. I could, I guess, run that in here and then back out through the front. We'll see, but quite honestly, I'm going to cover this with some black shrink wrap and just lay it right across there, and we'll see how that works out. If I have to, I'll change it. I've also grounded our ground here. I'm going to have to get back in there and clean the paint off, make sure that's a good ground. But I have to say, that's a lot tidier than it was before. Okay, we got our MG project down off the lift and moved over in the shop, and our Pinto project parked next to it. But we just took a little pause in the wiring. We've got all the wires run back under the firewall there, and really I think the thing I've got to do next is take the dash out, and I'm going to try to pre-wire the back of the dash. We've got to get the dash lights wired in and the little switches, and do all of the wiring that's peculiar to the dash, and then we'll see if we can make that into a harness that we can disconnect from the main harness, so that when we take the dash in and out or have to work on things, we can just unplug that harness. We'll have to see. That's going to take some thought. So the other thing we've done, we've gone ahead and mounted our wood strips at the back of the tub, and I think they're going to work out just right. We do have to leave a little gap between the corners and the centerpiece, because when the eventually when those are covered with vinyl, you need to have enough room in between them to cover the ends of those strips. So probably about what I saw in the video was the thickness of 3 layers of vinyl, whatever that amounts to. We need to leave that there. Right now I think that centerpiece is probably a little long, so when it comes time to upholster those pieces, if need be, the upholstery guy could sand a little bit off the end of that centerpiece to get a little more room. We've got our corner screws in, and we've got to drill the holes for the centerpiece, and we'll do that, and at least that part of it will be done. Haven't decided. I've kind of decided. That's confusing, isn't it? I think I'm going to paint those green, and we'll just go with it. I thought about staining them to match the dash. The problem is, until those are covered with vinyl, they're going to be exposed to the elements, and the stain, unless we put some clear urethane over the stain, is not a good idea. And you know, you got too many layers of stuff on there. I think it's easier just to put some green paint on there to match the body, and that'll be good enough until somebody can upholster it. So we'll do that. The big thing is, it's holiday season time. Christmas is coming, and this will be our last video of the year, and we'll be back middle of January, hopefully, if we make it, with some new stuff. I have to say, take a minute to say thank you to all of those people that have subscribed and watched. A year ago, we were still looking for 1,000 subscribers. So this past year, we've managed to get over that hurdle, and then some. We're not, we haven't taken off like some of these people get, 20, 30, 50,000, 100,000 subscribers. I don't know that we'll ever get to that point. But the channel is growing. We get new subscribers every month so far, and we appreciate that. We keep trying to do interesting videos. Sometimes what's interesting to you isn't interesting to anybody else. So we need to finish up this MG project. It needs to be on the road in the spring. It's gone on way too long, and we are getting close. I'd really, if I put some fuel to it and hooked the coil wire to the battery, it ought to start and run. So we're not that far off, but we're just trying to pick through these little jobs and not have to worry about stuff falling apart later. So that's where we are, and we'll see you next year, and want to wish everyone Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday Season and a joyous New Year. Thanks for watching.